deploy this foil and you shake it out and you get inside as the fire blows over you. Hopefully you live. It's the last thing you want to do, because at that point you have no control in the outcome of your well-being. You're just waiting. The fire was down below, fire was starting to come up. We got in our tents. You're inside, face down. You have no contact with your company other than screaming, but it's trying to scream over a train jet engine. And you're in there praying, pretty much. Everybody sees God when they're in the shake and bake tent.
Some firefighters have found that the best way to deploy the new shelter is to step in, sit down, and roll over. But make sure your feet end up toward the oncoming flames. While lying in your shelter, picture yourself in an entrapment. Imagine the noise, heat, and fear. Some firefighters have suffered from claustrophobia while in shelters. Spend enough time under your shelter to find out if you are claustrophobic. If you are, gradually increase the time you spend inside the shelter to help you adapt.
I think under these situations, when things start to go downhill, you start to respond to them in the way that conditioning or training that we've had, and purely on that instinct that you've developed. Like tying your shoes. You don't even look down anymore, you just do it.
Always deploy the fire shelter so that flame contact is minimized. Once you commit to your fire shelter, stay inside. Conditions outside the shelter will be far worse than those inside.
Doug Dodge, one of the other captains, came up to me and informed me that we had multiple spot fires below and that our route back down for escape, which I felt was our solid anchor point, had been lost, and they weren't able to control the spot fires below. So we moved up the hill. Still felt pretty comfortable that we were okay. We still had an area with some green that I felt if we had to, we could come back down and get back down to the road on that side. And as I looked, we started to have a spot fire in front of us.
I was kind of getting everything sorted, kind of getting bearings. I'm looking down the cliff face and I could see fire on that. I told the firefighters that were close to me to drop their packs and start raking it out, take their hand tools and making the area bigger. I kind of, I guess in my mind, already knew that we were going to stay where we were at. Whether we got in the shelters or not, I knew we had nowhere to go. Mitch had chased the spot up to the hill, so the spot had kind of grown and burned off the top of the hill already. I didn't burn it completely, it just burned off the grass, got it enough where it was charred and the rocks were hot. I think when I said the word, we're gonna have to deploy, some of the firefighters kind of clicked into that, and I could see them start coming out of the cases. And so the decision kind of got made.
There was nowhere to run. You were all trying to just, within seconds to come up with another plan, and there was no other plan. And the best thing we did was get into our shelters.
And so basically the guys did a semicircle, feet facing towards the fire. Each company officer laid down as close as he could with his crew. The deployment itself went smooth. The hardest part was you could see that some of the guys were really, really nervous. And I felt pretty comfortable that we had a large black area. We had enough distance between the fuel that we were going to be okay, but if we didn't deploy, that some guys were going to suffer some burns. And but the big thing was a couple of the guys, calmed the guys down, said, hey, look, you guys, we've got a good black area. We've got a lot of crews down below. We have helicopters, we have things that are going to come help us, but for the next few minutes, we're going to have to sit tight and wait for basically help to arrive.
Just instinct, those shelters came out, with good training. I loved having the handles, it made it a lot easier, but it took a little bit to get it out. So for the split second, it's like, come on, come on, come on.
And as it started to go on in duration as far as being in the shelter, the heat did increase from the east side with all the fuel that we had burning.
I'm not claustrophobic at all, but I definitely remember thinking, this is uncomfortable. I don't like this at all. I want to be out of here. But again, you just revert back to the training and they tell you, resist all urges to get out of your fire shelter.
So we sat for about 15 minutes inside the shelter. At about 12 minutes, we heard one of our helicopters coming, and we heard the water drop right next to us. Immediately could feel everything cool down considerably with that first water drop. Then we could hear the chainsaws down below with the hand crew there firing up chainsaws to cut a line to come into where we were. That was reassuring, knowing that you know, they were coming up, those sounds. And then the other fact, we had a second water drop, and with that, the strike team leader said, hey, you know, you're clear. Mitch, have one guy come out of his shelter and take a look around. I got up, took a look around, saw that we were okay, and just about that time, guys started to come out of their shelter. We had a hand crew coming up the hill, and that was pretty much the end of it. All the guys came out, no injuries, no one even had any cuts or scrapes.
The intent of this training video is to focus solely on the dynamic deployment of a fire shelter. Training dynamic fire shelter deployments will create a prime recognized decision-making process that can be adapted to any situation requiring a fire shelter deployment. Crew 2, look out. The key to any fire shelter deployment is leadership. Clear, precise direction must be given to the crew.
Crew 2, look out. Crew 2, copy. The fire pass below us. We're going to go ahead and deploy up here. Crew 2, fire pass below us, behind us. We're going to have to deploy up canyon. Grab your shelters, drop your packs, drop your tools. Let's go.
As the crew moves to the deployment site, the shelter removal process begins. Once the crew reaches the deployment site, they immediately get to the ground and attempt to stay as low as possible throughout the deployment, keeping in mind that the air within 6 to 12 inches is the coolest air available. Once in the shelter, the crew members ensure that their feet are to the fire and the fire shelter is sealed. It is not intended to be viewed as a sequential process, rather a rapid, life or death deployment focusing on getting as low to the ground as possible with an emphasis on protection of the airway. I'm Rob Gaylor, Superintendent 2. Today we're practicing on dynamic fire shelter deployments. Once you get to the deployment site, get to the ground. Remove the shelter from the package and grab the left and right hand tabs. Shake the fire shelter open. Get your feet into the shelter and cover your body. Once in the shelter, roll over, seal the edges, and protect your airway. So grab your practice shelters, get out in the dirt and practice dynamic fire shelter deployments.